Hello everyone, and welcome to Cat Tales. We are here today to share some stories with you, and the first story I have to tell, well now let me think. The first story I'm going to share with you could be true, but really isn't for the most part. So that makes our story an historic fiction. The story I'm going to share is called The Courage of Sarah Noble. Now let me tell you, because those of you listening in the city of Westfield certainly know the name Noble. Noble Hospital, Barnes & Noble, Noble Cooley Drum Factory. Those are all the same family. Sarah Noble was born in 1699 in Westfield. When she was about 8 years old, her father, John Noble, decided to move the family to New Milford, Connecticut. Now we know that John was a fur trader, so we think that that might be the reason why he moved his family out of here. Her grandfather, Thomas Noble, was one of the first settlers in the village of Westfield. Part of this is true, and part of it is probably not. But listen carefully, because the courage of Sarah Noble, well, that's really the story about the courage that a lot of people had to have in the early days of the settlement. And here it is. I lay on the quilt on the hard ground, and I looked up through the sky, and I could see one star up there. And I thought, maybe that's the star that my mother is looking at in Westfield. And then I remembered what my mother had told me when she wrapped my cloak around me before we left the village. She said, keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage. And I promised her that I would. Tonight was the first night that we had laid in the woods. For other nights we had come to a settlement. So I looked over and I could see my father leaning against the tree with his musket on his lap. And I could see Thomas the horse. And then I heard a noise. Whoo, whoo, Father, I said, Father. Sarah, 'tis not but an owl. It will not harm you. Now go to sleep, Sarah. And I laid back down and I pulled my cloak around me. And then I heard another noise. Father! Yes, Sarah. 'Tis but a fox looking for its mate, and it will not harm you. And then a little while later, I heard another sound, and it was even more frightening. Father! Sarah. Yes, 'tis a wolf, but he is far away, and I have my musket on my lap. Now go to sleep, Sarah. And I tried. I closed my eyes, but suddenly I had a need to hear my father's voice. Father? Yes, Sarah. Could you tell me a story? What shall I tell you, Sarah? I do not care, Father, as long as it is a story about home. Very well. Shall I tell you about when I came home and told your mother that we were going to build a new home in New Milford? Yes, Father, and you said that you had to go ahead of the family because the baby was too ill and could not make the trip, so Mother would have to stay behind in Westfield. Yes, Sarah. And you said that you could come with me and you could do the cooking and take care of me. Yes, Father, I did because Hannah would not do it, or Mary. No, Sarah. 'Tis lucky I have a daughter who can take care of me and knows how to cook. Yes, Father. And then I lay there thinking, I really did not know how to cook. But I knew that Mother could not make the journey because the baby was too ill for the trip. But I had never really done any cooking. I did not know. I had never even made a pie, but maybe they don't need pies in New Milford. And finally I slept. The next day we walked on for most of the day, and we came to a friendly settlement. We walked down the main street, and I said, "Father, I should like to get off of Thomas the horse because he has enough to carry." And so the three of us walked down the center of the street. There were pine branches lit in the windows in place of candles because it was beginning to get dark already. We walked up to a door, and my father knocked on the door, and this woman opened the door, and she looked down at me. And I thought when I saw her, she does not look like my mother at all. "Yes," said the woman. "Good day," said my father, bowing ever so politely. "My name is John Noble, and my daughter Sarah and I are traveling to New Milford to build a home. We are from the village of Westfield in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and we were wondering if you might know of a place where we can spend the night." "I am Mistress Robinson," she said. "You may stay here if you would like to. My husband is away for the evening, but my 4 children are here. You will have to sleep on the floor." "Oh, that would be ever so fine," said my father, "as last night we slept in the forest." "Well, come in," she said. She ushered me in, and I saw 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys standing there looking at me, giggling. And then I realized that I was alone because my father had taken care of Thomas the horse. "You may sit here," she said. I sat down on a bench by the table, and I pulled my cloak around me. "I shall hang up your cloak," she said. "Oh, no, if you don't mind, I should like to wear it." And then I remembered the words that my mother said. She said, "Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage." And I had planned to do that. I watched Mistress Robinson as she started to set the table for the evening meal, and she was clucking and fussing and telling the children what to do. And for a moment, she reminded me of my mother, although my mother did it in a more loving way. And soon my father came in, and we started the evening meal. And Mistress Robinson looked at me, and she said, "I don't know what you're thinking of, taking that young child off into the wilderness, and she but 7 years old." "I am not 7, I said. "I am nearly 9 years old." And the boys looked at me, and they laughed at me, and they said, "Oh, but there are things out there. There are things behind the trees. There are wild beasts with claws and sharp teeth, and they will jump out and they will eat you up." "Oh, no," I said, that is not true. My father said we would be very safe there." "No," said the boys, "there are wild beasts, and they will eat you." And I held my cape closer. And I thought, what if the boys were correct? What if things had changed since my father had journeyed there? What if there were wild animals? And suddenly I was very frightened. But as the meal went on, I relaxed a little bit, and my cloak dropped off me. One of the girls, Abigail, picked it up and said, "I will hang this up for you." And she held it against her face, and she said, "It is such a lovely cloak. I would love to have a red cloak like that someday." "You have no need of it," said her mother. "What you have is good enough." As the evening went on, finally it was time to go to bed, and we laid our quilts in front of the fire. Mistress Robinson tucked a quilt around me, and I said, "If you don't mind, I should love to have my cloak with me." "You have no need of it," she said. "You are warm enough by the fire." But still, I should like to have it. And so she laid it across me and said, "What thin blood. I can't imagine what your father is thinking." That night I didn't see the one star in the friendly trees I had seen before. That night I saw eyes and claws behind dark trees waiting to jump. I looked over and I saw my father wide awake. And I knew that he was wondering if it was safe to bring me through here. The next morning, I was quite pleased to be leaving Mistress Robinson's house. We walked and we walked and we walked for most of the day. And finally, my father said, "We have 2 more miles to go, Sarah. We have 1 more mile to go, Sarah, and then we will be home." And I thought, home? Father, tell me where we will stay, for we had no home there. And he said, "Now, Sarah, I have told you many times what we will do. I'll find a cave or a place in the side of the hill, and I'll carve it out, and we'll sleep there until I've built a house. And it will be a fine house, Sarah. It will be as fine as Mistress Robinson's." "Oh, no, Father," I said. "Our house will be much nicer than Mistress Robinson's." "Why do you say so?" said my father. "Because, Father, our house will be full of love." "Oh, my darling daughter," said my father, "you are wiser beyond your years. You have already learned that there are some people in the world who do not mean to be kind. Mistress Robinson would do well to have her children mind their words. I hope you did not mind them." "I did, but I did not say so. And if my brothers had been there with me, those boys would not have said that." But that was fine. We were on our way home. And as we walked, I tucked some flowers in Thomas's ears. I said, "Thomas, you must look appropriate for our new home." And finally we came to the edge of a clearing. And there was a deer at the other end. And my father raised his rifle to shoot. And I said, "Father, please do not do that. She is so lovely." "Sarah, we must have meat." "I know, Father, but just this once." And so we walked down the hill and crossed the great river. And my father did find a hollowed out spot. And he unloaded the horse, took everything off that we needed, the pots, the pans, the bedding, the building utensils, everything that would keep us safe. And that night we had warm Johnny cake over the fire, not like the cold meal we had been eating on the way. And we laid down in front of the fire, and I heard a noise. "Father!" "Yes, Sarah." That was not but an owl, and I believe that it fell off the branch." "Yes, that is what it did, Father. It fell off the branch." "Yes, Sarah." And then I heard another noise. "Father!" "Yes, Sarah." I think that was just a fox. Do not be afraid. I think it's just lost." "Yes, Sarah." And then a few minutes later, "Oh, Father, oh no, oh." "What is it now, Sarah?" "You know what it is." "Yes, Sarah."
It is a skunk."
It is well that I have a daughter to take care of me so well. And so the next day, and for a few days after that, my father was busy making our little home a better place. He built a palisade around us, and then he built a shed for Thomas. And then he set about making the furniture, the chairs and some stools and some beds and tables that we could use. And finally one morning my father said, "Now, Sarah, it is time for me to begin to build the house. There is a tall Indian across the way in the village, and he is going to help me. I know him well. I cannot pronounce his name, so I call him Tall John. And we are going off, but I have to take Thomas the horse." "Father," I said, "Thomas cannot build a house." For I had visions of Thomas walking through the woods with logs on his front hooves. "No, Sarah, he will not build, but he can pull the logs. Now you will stay here while I go." "Oh, I am to stay by myself? All alone? Sarah, there is nothing here. You will be safe. But the boys, Sarah, the boys were not right, and they were not kind. There is nothing. You will be fine, and you will be safe. And so I watched my father go over the river and up over the hill. It was a rather cool day, so I had my cloak, and I tied it up around my shoulders, and I thought, what shall I do? Well, if I'd been home, I would have been reading stories from the Bible for my doll, Arabella. We couldn't bring Arabella because there wasn't any room. Or I used to read to my baby sister, but no, she never listened anyway. So I decided that I would read a story from the Bible, but what story should I read? I liked the story about my namesake, Sarah. It was a little scary, but it had a good ending. Then I liked the story about David and Goliath. Oh, well, no matter. I just opened and started to read. But as I read, I could hear voices. I could hear footsteps. I could hear some kind of murmuring. And I thought, what is happening? I didn't dare look up. Maybe these were the wild beasts that the boys had told me. Maybe my father was wrong. And I pulled my cape around me and I thought, keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage. And the footsteps came closer and closer and closer. And finally, I knew that they had stopped at the fencing around me. So I looked up, and it was children. Children from the village nearby. And I realized that they weren't wearing any clothes. Well, unless that you called a piece of material on the front and the back clothing. I felt quite properly dressed in my English outfit, and I realized that they liked the sound of my voice. So I finished the story. And then when I got done reading, I closed the book and I said, "Good day, my name is Sarah Noble, and I come from the village of Westfield in the Massachusetts Bay Colony." And the children looked at each other and they spoke in a language that I had no idea what they were saying. And so I said it again. I said, "Good day, my name is Sarah Noble, and I come from the Massachusetts Bay Colony." And again, they spoke in a language I didn't understand. And so finally I said, "What is wrong with you? Doesn't anyone here speak the proper King's English?" And with that, they all turned and ran away. And I thought, Sarah Noble, you are a very bad child. You did not remember what your father said. You did not remember that your father said we should be kind and polite to anyone who comes into our home. I was afraid that the children would not come back, but they did. There were many of them, but there were two of the Native American children that I liked best. I could not understand their names, and they could not understand mine. When they tried to say it, it came out, Sarah, Sarah. We tried to teach each other words, but they could not say the English words, and I could not say their words. But it did not matter, for when children wish to, they find ways to play together. They showed me where the wild berries were, so that when my father came home with a fish for dinner, I could have sweet berries with them. One day they asked me if I could go to their home, and my father said that he believed they were the children of Tall John, the man who had been helping him. And so off I went. The days went by and we played and had a wonderful time until one morning my father said, "Now, Sarah, our house is ready, and it is time to go back and get your mother and the other children." "Oh, Father," I said, "that is wonderful." But Sarah, I need to tell you something. You will not be able to go with us. Father, what do you mean? Why? Sarah, there will not be room. There are many, many, many children, and there will not be room for you. So you will need to stay here. Stay here? Alone? But Father, I cannot do that. Sarah, you are not going to stay here. You are going to stay with Tall John and his wife and the children. But Father, I cannot. For it is one thing to play with someone, but to live with strangers far away, all by myself. Father, I cannot. I have lost my courage. Sarah, said my father, the best courage there is the courage when you are afraid. Yes, Father. And so Tall John came and stood by me while my father loaded what he needed on Thomas. And I watched him get on the horse, and he went down the hill and across the river and up over the next side. And he turned around once and he waved, and I felt a tear falling down my cheek. And I thought, but what if something happens and he doesn't get back? What if something happens to Thomas and my father can't get home? Would anyone know where I am? Would they even come and look for me? Would they even know where to find me? Tall John picked me up and put me on his shoulders and brought me to the village. That first day was fine. It was like any other day when I played with the children. The meal was a bit different because they all ate out of one pot, but it was tasty and it was warm, and I did not have to cook it. That night, I rolled out my bed and my quilt and everything that I was going to need. The children watched me when I knelt down to pray. They looked at their father, and he explained to them that I was praying to our Great Spirit the same way they prayed to their Great Spirit. And I laid down that night, and I held my cloak around me. And I remembered what my mother had said. Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble. Keep up your courage. The few days that we were there, they passed very quickly. The children's mother, Tall John's wife, made me a buckskin dress, and it was so soft and comfortable, and moccasins that I could walk through the forest as silently as they could. The days passed quickly, and there was no danger, for the Indians kept watch on Guarding Hill. Once in a while, I would hear a noise in the distance, and I would be a little frightened, but I knew that Tall John was watching. And so the days passed, and one fall day, we were playing a game. Oh, wait, it was my favorite game. Everyone would line up the moccasins, and someone would hide a pebble in the shoe, and you had to guess whose shoe it was. And it was my turn to guess, and the pebble was in my shoe. And then, suddenly, I felt as if someone was watching me. I turned around, and it was my father. My father was back, and I ran, and I jumped into his arms, and I said, Father, Father, where is Mother, and Mary, and Margaret, and John? Are they here? Yes, Sarah. Yes, said my father, laughing. Yes, everyone is here, and your mother is waiting. Oh, but Sarah, I think you had better go get your own clothes on, or your mother will not know you at all. I took you for one of the other children. I ran back in, and I put on my English clothes, but now they felt stiff and scratchy, and they bothered me. My shoes did not fit, so I would have to wear my moccasins. And Tall John picked me up one more time on his shoulder. And I said, "Hurry, Tall John, my mother is here, my mother is here." And he took me down the hill again and across the great river. And there was the house halfway up the hill. And my mother was standing in the open door with the baby in her arms, the baby who never could have made the trip months ago, who surely would not be here today. And she took the baby down and put him down, and the baby ran into my arms, and I held him tightly. My mother walked over and hugged me to her apron. And she said, "I don't know what your father was thinking, leaving you here with strangers. Mother, they are not strangers, they are friends. And Mother, they were as good as parents as you and Father are." "Well, I'll believe that after I've thought about it. But what are those outlandish shoes on your feet?" That's when I knew my mother was really there. That night, after we ate dinner, I got to stay up a little later with my older brothers and sisters. And I said, "Mother, did you bring my doll, Arabella?" I was afraid that you would not remember her. "Oh, I did," said my mother, "but I had hoped you had not outgrown her." "Oh, I have not outgrown her," I said. "Arabella is my baby." And so I went to fetch her where my mother had left her. And I tucked her into her cradle, and I said, "Now, Arabella, you must sleep, and you must keep up your courage, but all is well, Arabella." And I heard my father say to my mother, "'Tis well to see our Sarah be a young girl again, for she has had to be an adult for too long." "I am not a young girl," I said. "I am almost 9 years old. And when I grow up, I am going to get married, and I'm going to have 9 children, and I'm going to be a school teacher." "Very well," said my mother, "but if you are to do all those things, you need to get to bed and get your rest." Now, there was a time before all this that when my mother said go to bed, I did not want to do that. But now, it was the nicest thing I had ever heard. So I climbed into bed, and my mother tucked me in. But I left my cloak hanging on a peg by the door. I did not need to wear my cloak now, because indeed, I had kept up my courage. Thank you.